In the past week, EU countries have made a series of moves against Israel, amid concerns about imminent famine in the Gaza Strip. France, the UK and Malta have all declared their intention to recognise the state of Palestine in September. The Netherlands has imposed travel bans on two Israeli cabinet ministers. France, Germany and the UK have begun work on a European-led Gaza peace plan. And, in a first, the European Commission has proposed partially suspending Israel from its Horizon Europe research programme. On top of that, the EU is under increased pressure to impose economic sanctions on Israel, with 40 cross-party MEPs urging the EU to suspend its trade deal with Israel and sanction members of its government. This all comes amid heightened concerns about the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, with an alert published on Tuesday by the UN-backed Food Security Initiative, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, stating that the worst-case scenario of famine is now unfolding in Gaza. So in this video, we'll explain Europe's shifting stance, whether the bloc has finally lost patience with Israel, and what could happen next. Dive deeper into politics with our magazine Too Long. Yep, we make a real physical magazine. In the latest issue, we discuss if Europe can really defend itself, why people like Putin get away with it, and whether we're observing the end of the American order. Find out more by clicking the link in the description. First, let's recap how the EU's position has changed over recent months. We last made a video on this topic in May, when EU-Israel tensions rose after Israeli soldiers opened fire towards a European delegation in the West Bank, following a decision by EU foreign ministers to review the bloc's trade agreement with Israel. This decision came in response to the launch of Israel's intensive and ongoing military offensive in Gaza, dubbed Operation Gideon's Chariots, its objective being, in Netanyahu's words, to take control of all the territory of the Gaza Strip. For context, Operation Gideon's Chariots is a massive operation consisting of a ground invasion of both northern and southern Gaza, backed by the Israeli Air Force, which began in mid-May. But airstrikes in densely populated urban areas have killed at least hundreds of Palestinian civilians, and ahead of the operation, Israel imposed significant restrictions on humanitarian aid entering Gaza, with the UN repeatedly warning of mass starvation in the territory. Concerns also emerged that the operation is actually aimed at ethnically cleansing Gaza, with Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich saying that Israel's goal was, quote, destroying everything that's left of Gaza, conquering, cleansing, and remaining in Gaza until Hamas is destroyed, and adding that Palestinians would, quote, leave in great numbers to third countries. In response, the EU announced a review into its trade deal with Israel, and some individual countries took further measures. Spain, for instance, passed a non-binding motion calling for the government to ban exports of any material that could be used to strengthen the Israeli military, while the UK suspended its trade talks with Israel and in June sanctioned two Israeli ministers, Smotrich and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, with the UK's foreign minister describing Smotrich's comments as extremist, repellent and monstrous. France, the UK and Canada also issued a joint statement warning of concrete actions against Israel if it did not immediately allow aid trucks into Gaza. Then, in the following weeks, Israel introduced a US-Israeli aid distribution scheme, run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, which was widely criticized for violating humanitarian principles and weaponizing aid. The UN's humanitarian chief, Tom Fletcher, warned that it would make aid conditional on political and military aims, calling it a cynical sideshow and a deliberate distraction. And according to the UN Human Rights Office, over the past 2 months, more than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli military while trying to access aid, more than 760 of them in the vicinity of GHF sites. Indeed, since the GHF began operating in late May, Gaza's humanitarian crisis has worsened exponentially, with an alert published this week by a UN-backed Food Security Initiative saying that the worst-case scenario of famine is now unfolding in Gaza. According to the report, food deliveries plummeted between February and May, and rates of malnutrition in Gaza City have almost quadrupled from 4.4% in May to 16.5% in July, and malnutrition deaths are also reportedly rising. Now, this brings us to the events of the past week. In just the last week, 3 more European countries, France, the UK and Malta, have all declared their intention to recognise the state of Palestine in September. The Netherlands has banned Israeli ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir from entering the country. France, Germany and the UK have begun work on a European-led Gaza peace plan, and the European Commission proposed partially suspending Israel from its Horizon Europe research programme, which would be the first time any country has been suspended. On top of that, Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that Germany reserves its right to change its mind on the EU's trade pact with Israel, having so far ruled out supporting the review. And Germany, France and the UK are joining efforts by Jordan to airdrop aid into Gaza this week. So why is all this happening now? Well, sadly, it's because the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is approaching a point of no return. Organisations have for months warned of mass starvation and famine in Gaza, and some experts believe that any intervention now may be too late, with the director of the World Food Programme saying on Tuesday that Gaza needs to be flooded with large-scale food aid immediately and without obstruction in order to prevent mass starvation. This is why the UK, Germany and France have begun airdropping aid, even though it's inefficient, expensive and dangerous, with at least 11 Palestinians injured by falling pallets in northern Gaza this week. Ultimately, it seems like Europe is finally losing patience with Israel, given its continued destruction of civilian infrastructure in Gaza, killing of Palestinians seeking aid, and repeated ignoring of international demands. However, Israel has successfully appeased European countries before, and it's possible this will happen again without significant repercussions. Specifically, Israel has followed a distinct pattern in recent months, as the International Crisis Group has outlined, whereby it restricts aid, eases up when famine alerts appear, and then tightens control again once attention has faded. We saw this in the spring, when Israel responded to international condemnation of its aid blockade, which began on March 2nd and lasted for 11 weeks, by reopening aid crossings into Gaza, before shortly after launching the GHF scheme, which was significantly more limited than the pre-existing system. It now looks like this cycle is continuing, with Israel at the weekend announcing a tactical pause in its military activity and opening humanitarian corridors to allow the entry of minimal supplies. However, the EU really does seem to be slowly edging towards sanctions, particularly via the Horizon suspension proposal, which came in response to a European Commission review that found Israel was breaching its human rights obligations under the terms of the deal. However, the proposal failed on Tuesday after Germany and Italy said that they needed longer to consider it. Meanwhile, the Netherlands, Ireland, France, Luxembourg, Slovenia, Portugal, Malta, Spain and Sweden all support the suspension, with several saying that they will also push the EU for stronger sanctions, potentially in trade. So we should all keep an eye out for potential developments in the coming weeks, particularly from Germany. And if you want to know more about this topic, then there's plenty of other outlets reporting on it too. Unfortunately though, every news source has its bias, and no matter how hard each of us try, we'll inevitably miss a story, or worse, only hear half of the story in the first place. And that's where our sponsor Ground News comes in. Ground News is a website and app that collects thousands of articles to help you better understand the world around you, pulling back the curtain on media bias. For example, this story about the Netherlands banning Israeli ministers from entering the country has been covered by more than 111 sources. We know that 27 of these have been reported on by the left, while 19 reports have come from the right. Every story also comes with a detailed view of the bias distribution, factuality scores, and even specific ownership information. But my favourite part of the app and website is the aptly named blind spot feed. It presents you with stories and articles that haven't been reported on one side of the aisle or the other. For instance, if you lean right, you might miss this story about Trump saying that the US will partner with Israel to run additional food centers in Gaza. When it comes to blind spots, it's not just about discovering different stories though. It's also about discovering just how political bias frames the stories themselves. Having a tool that helps you to spot this and helps you take action is a real game changer. It's no secret that here at TLDR News, we're constantly thankful for Ground News. It's such an incredibly useful platform that captures information that you just can't get anywhere else, and keeps you informed in a media landscape that's constantly trying to attract your attention and sway you towards or away from certain political viewpoints. If you're interested in everything that Ground News has to offer, you can get 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan by using the link in the description, or by scanning the QR code on screen. This offer is only available here, so make sure that you go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link in the description to get started and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.